A 20-year-old college student and a werewolf, her life is full of challenges. Living with her parents and yearning for independence, she struggles to achieve it due to her studies and part-time job. As she makes a birthday wish to find her mate, is she aware that her inner wolf is also seeking a sense of belonging? And when she learns of an urgent pack meeting she must attend, can she foresee that this will be a turning point in her destiny? Unlock the secret life of a werewolf college student. Subscribe now for exclusive insights. Chapter 1. I glared at my parents across the breakfast table, as they sang happy birthday to me in an overly joyous tune, which I didn't care for. The last thing a 20-year-old college student, who still lived at home, with her parents wanted to hear, was them still singing happy birthday, to her like they had every year since she was a child. It was bad enough that I still lived under their roof, but the fact they still treated me like a child made it much worse. I was itching to be independent for some time now, but I just didn't have the resources for it. Going to college didn't leave much time for working, so with my part-time waitress job on the side, I was barely paying the bills I had now. Adding new ones just wasn't an option. Mom and Dad had been more than understanding about my situation, and agreed to keep me up, as long as I needed, until I was able to move out. Neither of them was rushing me though, so I was thankful for that. At the song's end they both stood and clapped before Mom pushed the chocolate iced cake in front of my face. I stared it down grudgingly, unsure whether or not to taste it. Why did chocolate have to be my weakness? I had been on a diet for a solid month now, but had barely lost any weight. If I was able to go out for a run more frequently, I'm sure I wouldn't even have to be on this diet. Being a werewolf alone was enough to keep one in shape. You could burn a day's calories in just one run. I'll just be glad once all of these college courses are over and I can have more free time. My wolf really needed a good run. Now that summer was here, I'd at least have a good 2 months before classes started back up again at the local campus. Maybe Charlie will let me pick up a few extra shifts so I can start apartment hunting. I'm sure that by the end of summer, I'll have enough saved for first and last month's rent. Oh, come on, honey. It's your birthday. One slice of cake won't kill you, Mom urged. It will when I have to work it off later. Maybe after work tonight I can go for a decent run. It's much needed. I suppose, I mumbled just to make her happy. Pass me a plate. Mom clapped her hands happily as Dad passed out the plates. I don't know who was more anxious to eat it, me or them. Don't forget to make a wish, she said, watching the lit candles in the middle burn. Why not? May as well humor them, right? I closed my eyes and leaned in close while thinking what I wanted to wish for. Within a few seconds I automatically knew. My mate. I opened my eyes and blew out the 2 and 0 candle just before Dad started cutting the cake. Well, someone was hungry. I thought sarcastically to myself. I dug my fork into the chocolatey goodness that now sat in front of me. It's not often I get chocolate for breakfast. Or at all for that matter. I may as well make the most of it. Ah, heaven. I smiled. The creamy milk chocolate melted away in my mouth. It was perfect. Truly and utterly perfect. Oh honey, before I forget, there is a pack meeting taking place tonight. Alpha Daniel has requested that everyone be there. Apparently he has some news to announce. Well, almost perfect. What could be so darn important that they needed everyone tonight? Now I'm gonna have to switch my shift with Celeste, and she is not going to be happy with that. She hates covering the weekend shift. The nights were always the worst. That's when the diner was filled with the less desirable people. You know, the ones that were a little too touchy and the worst tippers. Well, after 9 p.m. at least. Those last 3 hours until the diner closed were the most dreadful though. Honey, you're spacing out again. Have you been losing sleep? You remember what Dr. Peterson said? I know, Mom, I replied, cutting her off before she could lecture me further. I was just thinking about the diner. I don't know exactly what I said that made her smile, but she had the biggest grin of all on her face at the mention of it. In fact, it slightly worried me. You know, that reminds me, dear. Now that it's your 20th birthday, you might meet your mate tonight. I raised an eyebrow to her in confusion. What does that have to do with the diner? Well, when you find your mate, you won't have to work so much. You know, he'll take care of you. You might actually start to enjoy life again. Oh, so that's where she was going with this. Mom, you know good and well I don't want a mate for that reason. I want my mate because he'll love me unconditionally. I don't plan on changing my lifestyle because of him, I stated. I know, honey, but you may find yourself doing a lot of things you thought you wouldn't normally do, she smiled. Mates change everything. I rolled my eyes at her but didn't reply. There was no sense arguing with her over it. She'll just pull the experience card at me. After all, she had a mate and I did not. Maybe Mom's right. Maybe that will all change tonight. Maybe he's waiting to meet me as well. Let's see, who all has turned 20 since our last meeting. Well, there was Tim, the beater's brother, and Zach, my cousin, who couldn't be my mate. Who else? I know there was one more. Oh, our alpha, Daniel. But that was only the of-age males. That didn't include the unmated ones who were of all ages. Even though Alpha Daniel had turned 20 exactly a week before I had, I know there was not chance in hell I was his mate. I'm not lunar material. Besides, I'm pretty sure he was going to announce his mating to his long-time girlfriend Jasmine tonight. That seems like the only logical reason why we would be holding a mandatory meeting if it was not an emergency. She was a good year older than him, but I never heard her mention that they were mates. Perhaps they were keeping it secret until they knew for sure, and now that Daniel is 20 there is no need to wait any longer. He could confirm it. I guess we'll find out tonight. My thoughts were cut off by my phone ringing, giving me a bit of a fright. It always rang unnecessarily loud when it was on a hard surface, and I hate that. I groaned and picked it up from the table to see who was calling me. When the name flashed across my screen, it only served to irritate me further. What did he want? I wasn't due to work for another 6 hours. Something must have happened. Hey, Charlie, I answered, hiding my annoyance. Claire, just the person I needed to talk to, he chuckled nervously. I sighed and rolled my eyes. Well, you got her. After a brief moment of silence he began to speak. I'm in need of a small favor, he said. Someone bail on you again? I asked, keeping my friendly tone. After all, he was still my boss and I needed this job until after college to help keep me up. I heard a heavy sigh on the other end of the line before he replied. Celeste quit this morning. Not another one, I groaned. Lately, waitresses had been quitting left and right, and now one of the senior employees had just quit as well. I suppose it didn't help that most of them were finding their mates. I'm sure the male wolves didn't want their mates working in place like this. If they did, there was sure to be a fight every night with one of the many inappropriate customers. What was I supposed to do now? I was going to ask Celeste to cover my shift tonight. Andrea was working the lunch rush with me, so that left no one for tonight. At that thought I knew why he was calling me. You want me to pull a double shift today, don't you? I asked hesitantly. Seeing as how bad I needed the money, I would have normally accepted his offer, but sadly I had to be at the PAC meeting tonight. Too bad he wasn't a werewolf, so I couldn't explain the situation to him. Was there no one else who could take my place? You know, I hate to ask, but Rita is on vacation and Andrea is still new, so I have no one else. He explained. I sighed. I knew he was right, but I didn't know how to help him. Please, he begged. I'd never heard him sound so desperate before. I'll give you an extra $2 on the hour for coming in on such short notice. He quickly added. Now he was singing my tune. How could I resist an offer like that? Do you know what an extra $2 an hour could do to my bank account? Fine, I said. I'll do it. Oh, thank you, Claire, he said in relief. You really saved me here. I owe you. Yeah, about that. I kind of need a favor as well, I said. Well, too, actually. Anything, he said. First, I'd like to take on all the extra shifts this summer, so I'd like to ask that you don't hire anyone else. Done, he agreed. And? I need off work for a couple of hours tonight for something important, I added. I cringed slightly, waiting for his reply while the silence grew. I almost feared that would be a deal-breaker, but I silently hoped it wasn't. I couldn't miss the pack meeting tonight. That would land me in hot water with the alpha. Okay, but just 2 hours and I expect you back here immediately, he said, trying to sound like a firm boss again. Oh, thank goodness. I felt such relief at his cooperation. Thank you, Charlie. I'll be there as soon as I can. I smiled as I pulled the phone away from my ear and hung it up. Was it weird of me to be happy about this? I mean, I'm getting extra hours, more money, and still able to attend the meeting tonight. That's something to be happy about, right? I just might get that apartment after all. And with only $30 in my account right now, I could definitely use the extra money. I trudged through the bustling diner to the counter to pick up the 2 dinner orders for table 12. They were growing increasingly impatient, and had already asked me about their order 3 times. Didn't they notice we were incredibly busy tonight? It had been going full swing since lunch today, and it hadn't let up since. This was the hell you went through when working on a Saturday, and with only one waitress. Well, until 10 minutes ago, when Andrea finally showed up. I guess she was here to temporarily relieve me. I looked up at the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until I had to leave. I could not be late. After I sat the plates down at table that ordered them, I walked back to pick up my second order while letting out a yawn. It has only been 5 hours since I started the shift, and I was already feeling mentally and physically exhausted. I think I might need a 5-hour energy shot just to get through the rest of the day. They seem to work well for me, but I hate to rely on them. The effects weren't as good once your body got used to them. Warren, break time, Charlie yelled across the noisy diner and pointed to his watch. 2 hours starts now. I gave him a quick nod of my head and set the plates down before I tore the apron off and tossed it aside, then made my way to the counter. After grabbing my belongings from behind it, I quickly rushed out the door in a hurry. My car was the third one down the lot in the employee parking spaces, so it didn't me long to get inside. If I wasn't in such a hurry, I might have taken the time to enjoy the summer air, but now was not the time for that. If I was even so much as 5 minutes late, I was sure to get into heaps of trouble by the Alpha, or the Elders. As I pulled up in front of the large pack house, I was silently thankful that I wasn't the last to arrive. From the looks of things, it seemed parents were already here, as was most of the pack except for the few that were arriving just as I was. I guess I drove a little faster than I thought I did. Oh well, whatever gets me here on time. I'm not complaining. I walked through the mass of cars following behind a couple, who was also heading towards the back of the house. In the evenings, weather providing, we always had outdoor meetings. However, on occasion, the Alpha held them in his office. And when I say office, I mean a room the size of 2 or 3 of my bedrooms put together. I suppose it had to be rather large in size though to accommodate the size of the pack. Claire! A little girl screamed as soon as she had caught sight of me. Is that my little Jess? I chuckled, lifting her off the ground. Jessica was a little girl I used to babysit when I was in high school for extra cash. Her parents were always busy with pack duties, so they hired me to take care of her in the evenings until they were finished. That was 2 years ago. She was barely even walking then. Now I'm standing here looking at a very tall 3-year-old who was still as cute as ever and whom I had missed with all my heart. "Hello, Claire," Mrs. Thompson's warm voice interrupted us. I set Jess down on the ground and turned to greet her in return. "Hey, Mrs. Thompson. How are you?" I asked. "I am well, thank you, but I believe the meeting is about to start. Would you like to sit with us?" she offered. "I'd love to," I replied before following her to the seats. I sat next to Jess before she looped her arm through mine and looked towards the front. Seeing as Mr. Thompson was third in command, we had great front row seats, so we weren't bothered with looking over top of people's heads to get the view. I was grateful for that, seeing as I wasn't exactly the tallest person in the pack. "Hello. Thank you all for coming this evening. I realize this meeting was sort of last minute, but I have an important announcement to make," the sweet, melodic voice of our alpha said. He stood no more than 10 feet in front of me, looking out into the crowd of people with the most beautiful, proud smile on his face I'd ever seen. Nothing could be more perfect. He was just so wonderful. I just wanted to touch him. Oh no. What's wrong with me? Why am I thinking about Alpha Daniel that way? It's not right. He had a girlfriend, and he was way out of my league. Today I'd like to announce my wedding and mating to the most beautiful girl I've ever met, Jasmine Marshall. Just then I felt my wolf about to jump out of my skin. Something had really gotten her riled up. "Mate?" she whispered. "No. It can't be. He can't be my mate if he's already proclaimed his love for Jasmine. I mean, he's just announced getting married, for goodness sakes. So why was I feeling this way? Maybe it's just confusion. Yeah, that's it. I haven't eaten anything since breakfast and I'm really tired. That's bound to mess with your head." The sound of the crowd applauding brought me from my thoughts, and my eyes drifted back up to them. They were smiling brightly and holding hands while gazing at all the pleased wolves. It was like they were the president and first lady. Just as everyone got up to shake their hands, I immediately began to think of ways to get out of here. I didn't want to be around him if I couldn't even hold it together just by hearing his voice. What if he thinks I like him or something? I can't. He's Daniel, an alpha, and I'm me. We don't even make sense. Did you hear? Jasmine is going to be our Luna, Jess grinned with excitement. I looked down at her with my best fake smile without a word, then quickly turned away. If I was going to go, now would be my chance. As the pack crowded around them, I took my chance and disappeared behind everyone, slowly making my distance. Surely no one would notice me with all the excitement going on. Once I was sure I wasn't in sight of anyone from the pack, I started to pace a little quicker until I reached my car. I had never been so glad to see it in all my life. As my hand stretched out to grab the handle, a voice caught me off guard, sending a wave of panic through me. "Where are you going?" Jess's soft voice called out. "Are you leaving?" I quickly looked in her direction and saw the saddened look on her face staring back at me. "Yeah. I need to get back to work," I said, which wasn't a lie technically. His features then became saddened. "But you didn't say goodbye." My heart clenched and I desperately wanted to reach out to her, but I knew I had to leave. I needed to put some distance between me and this place as soon as possible. "Look, Jess, I really have to go, but I promise I'll come by and see you Thursday." "Okay." That seemed to perk her up and she ran to me for a quick hug. "You promise?" she asked with a toothy grin. "I cross my heart," I replied, adding the X over my heart for extra effect. Okay, she nodded before letting go of me. Now you better get back to your mom before she gets worried about you, I said. She then turned from me and started back in the direction I had just come from before calling back to me. Bye, Clay. I smiled fondly after her until I made sure she did as I said, then immediately got into my car and left. With the windows down and the music turned up, I did my best to drown out my thoughts and forget everything that had just happened. I'm sure tomorrow all of this would be out of my head, and I could get on with living my life again. Maybe even let my wolf out as well. It's obvious she's having side effects from being cooped up so long. I think some fresh air will do her good. Chapter 2. With the passing days I thought of my mate often. All hopes I had of forgetting him were now gone, and I found myself unable to distract myself from thinking about him. I don't know why it was so hard for me since it didn't serve a purpose at all. He was off planning some extravagant wedding with Jasmine, while I sat here saddened by the thought of my mate mating with someone else. Yes, I had finally come to terms with what was happening to me. I had found my mate and that's all there was to it. I couldn't change it or do anything about it. I just had to accept it. I tried to ignore the urging of my wolf to go to him, but at times it was a bit overbearing. It was exhausting having her in my mind all time, with no way to switch her off. I knew she wouldn't give up until we had him. The only problem was, he didn't know we existed. I'm not exactly sure what I was going to do about that either. Some parts of me wanted to let him go since he seemed so happy with her, but another part of me wanted to claim what's mine. It wasn't fair that she belonged to him, and it wasn't right either. Didn't she have a mate of her own? Where was he in all of this? Had he rejected her or she him? Had they not met yet and got tired of waiting? I've seen it before. Some people didn't find their mates until they had already aged and had lived out their lives. One of our pack members only found their mate a few years ago, and she was 75. It must have been so hard to wait that long, but worth it when they found each other though. Finding your mate was the most special thing in the world. Nothing could make you happier. That's why you should seize every opportunity to be with them. But I couldn't because she had him. Jasmine. Over the past few days I'd come to hate that name. Just knowing what she was to my mate killed me. I know that it wasn't her fault though. She didn't even know about me. But that still didn't stop the hatred. Order up. Frank yelled while ringing the bell. I laid down the rag I had been using to wipe the same spot with for 10 minutes, and went to get the plates. It was fairly slow right now with it being between rush hours, and also I was trying to find ways to keep myself busy so I couldn't think. Thinking was only painful for me. I preferred not to do it. Here you go, I smiled, setting down the plates in front of the elderly couple. Can I get you anything else? No, thank you dear, the woman said kindly. I believe we have everything we need. Her husband must have agreed, because he didn't even look in my direction before eating his meal. I nodded my head at them both before turning away to go back to the counter I was wiping down before I was interrupted. I let out a sigh once I reached my destination, and propped myself up on my elbow. I took a glance around the place, seeing if anyone needed anything before realizing that no one else was there. This was going to be a long 3 hours. I suppose I could make more coffee, but I don't want it to go to waste. 2 of our 3 burners still had full pots on them, so it really wasn't necessary for the third. If Charlie was here, no doubt he'd have a list of chores for me to do, but thankfully he wasn't coming today. He had to take his wife for some kind of yearly checkup, and only said he'd be by to close up shop tonight. The bell on the door rang, bringing my attention the new customer walking in. He nodded to the elderly couple, who were watching as he entered, and offered them a kind smile as he passed by. He was practically radiating with confidence, which I found rather odd. Normally only alphas gave off that kind of energy, but to be honest I could tell if he was even a werewolf, and if he was I hadn't seen him around here before. He continued passing by the many tables, not bothering to give them a second glace, as he made the way to the counter where I was standing, not breaking eye contact the entire way. The moment felt quiet, intense. He took the stool directly in front of me, while giving me a breathless smile, and running his hand through his thick dark hair. His ocean blue eyes staring back at me made me feel more nervous than I already was. For some reason I couldn't look away from him. It was like he was willing me to keep eye contact with. There was no doubt about it, this man was very attractive, but something about him seemed suspicious. He had a smell I couldn't place. It didn't seem human, but it wasn't werewolf either. It's almost like he masked it or something. "Hello, Claire," he said, staring at me with those hypnotizing eyes, waiting for a reply from me. My breath caught in my throat at the sound of my name escaping his full smooth lips. "Why, you know me?" I stuttered, probably sounding like a complete idiot in front of this Greek god. A smirk quickly covered his face as he reached towards me, taking my name tag between his fingers, then quickly releasing it. I could feel my heart going into overdrive at his closeness. "Oh? Of course," I chuckled nervously while trying to cover up my embarrassment. "What can I get you? How about today's special and your number?" he asked. I stared at him in disbelief, making it fairly obvious I was taken by surprise at his request. Had he really just said that? I mean, sure, I had guys that hit on me occasionally, but he was different. Something about him seemed so dark. I was even more surprised by my wolf. She didn't have much to say about Kieran and remained quiet in the back on my head, remaining unspoken. It was as if she was studying him. Was all I could manage to get out while staring at him blankly. I honestly didn't know what I was supposed to say to that. I didn't want him to have my number, but I had feeling that he wasn't going to give up that easy either. "I'm sorry, but that's not on the menu," I said before forcing myself to look away from his and writing down his order. I wasted no time distancing myself from him, taking his order to the cook. Once I had returned, he was still watching me intently. I sighed while brushing a stray blonde hair out of my face and shook my head. "I don't go out with guys who don't have a name." "Well, lucky for you I do," he said, offering me his hand to shake. "Kieran Knight." I looked down at his hand, cautiously debating on whether or not to shake it before finally giving in. His warm hand embraced mine gently, holding it there so that I could not move. "Claire Warren," I said. "You're not from around here, are you?" I asked him. I didn't want to seem too suspicious, but I had to ask him. I think I'd remember if I saw a face like his before. He chuckled while releasing my hand and leaned back in his seat a little. The absence of his hand in mine made it seem so empty and dull now. Am I that transparent?" He had an amused expression on his face as he waited for my reply. "It's just that I haven't seen you around here before," I stated. "Actually, this is only my second time here," he admitted. "I'm looking for someone." "Well, what's their name?" "Maybe I know them," I said, hoping he'd tell me and allow some insight into who he was. He just seemed so mysterious. That made me eager to find out more about him. If he was looking for someone in my pack, then most likely he was a werewolf like me. But if he wasn't, then he was just the most intimidating human I had ever met. And that was a lot coming from a wolf. "I'd bet on it," he said. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I had a feeling there was some kind of hidden meaning behind it, that I was sure about. Mr. Tall, dark and mysterious, wasn't giving anything up. "So how long are you in town for?" I asked, changing the subject. He shrugged as if he didn't even know the answer to that question himself before replying. "A few days, maybe less." He was purposely being vague. Figuring out this guy was like trying to solve the Da Vinci Code. It wasn't going to happen. He was treading lightly, making sure not to give up too much information. He was up to something. I just didn't know what it was. "What would you like to drink?" I asked, grabbing a cup by the beverage dispenser. "Water's fine," he said while searching for something in his jacket pockets. As I began filling up his glass with ice, I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. "Would you happen to know where the Ravenhill community is?" he asked, squinting at the paper he held in his hand, that just came from the pockets he was previously digging in. His question had taken me by sheer surprise, and only confirmed what I had speculated to begin with. I fought to push away the shock. "No one goes there. Unless they are a werewolf." "Our Ravenhill?" "Yeah, I have some business there," he said easily. "So he was a wolf. Then why couldn't I smell him? All wolves have a scent, but he doesn't it. Something is wrong with this picture." "It's about 4 miles up the road," I began. "Once you pass Goodyear, take a left and then just follow the signs. You'd think that if he was planning on meeting with my pack he'd know how to get there. Besides, I don't know how he would even get onto our territory without Border Patrol knowing." "Order up," Frank yelled, ringing that obnoxious bell again. "That would be yours," I mumbled before turning to get it. "That's okay," he said, causing me to stop in my tracks halfway to the order up counter. "I got what I came for." I raised an eyebrow to him, as he pulled a $50 bill from his wallet and laid it out on the counter in front of him. "That should cover it," he smiled while getting up from his seat. "It was nice meeting you, Claire. I'll be seeing you again soon." Before I could question him on what he meant, he was already out the door and from my sight while I stood in wonder. Something was definitely weird about him. Maybe I should warn the pack that an outsider was asking questions. But then if I did that I'd have to talk to Daniel and then he'd know we were mates. It would change things for both of us. I would either get accepted or rejected, and neither of those I was exactly ready for. Perhaps I wouldn't have to talk to him at all. Kieran came in alone, so that doesn't exactly scream threat to me. Maybe he was just passing through and looking for a friend, just like he said. It was certainly possible. I glanced back down at the money lying on the counter and realized he'd left me an unnecessarily large tip. His meal was less than $10. No one in their right mind would leave a tip so large. It was strange, almost as strange as he was. I sat in the crowded club with Jennifer next to me while she was busy chatting with some stranger. I knew that he was human, but I didn't know him personally. That tells me that she is only looking for a good time. She was smart when it came to her mate. She didn't want a serious relationship to avoid any future complication when she met her mate. So in the meantime, she decided to just have a little fun until that day finally came. She was much more confident than me. This was her weekend routine, and I was always just along for the ride. It beats sitting at home on the weekend, doing nothing even if I did leave alone every night. I just wanted to loosen up a bit. I had no intentions of meeting anyone. That did not stop Jennifer from trying to set me up though. If a guy she was interested in came in with a friend, she'd always try to set me up with them to make it easier on her. She never gives up. Just as I took a sip of my drink, I noticed someone leaning on the counter next to me, and they weren't going away. His stare was way too obvious. I could only imagine it was Jennifer's doing. "Can I help you?" I asked as politely as I could. He didn't look too bad, but I still couldn't get Daniel out of my head. In any other situation I would have flirted with him, but my wolf hated anyone that wasn't my mate. It's only became this bad since seeing Daniel a few days ago. I didn't quite know how to handle her, and it was getting worse. The only exception to that rule was the stranger that came into the diner today. She found him quite mysterious, just as I did. I don't think she knew exactly what to make of him. "The name's Jones," he smirked, holding out his hand to me. "Mila." I lied, not bothering to accept it, and looked down at my drink. I'd probably never see this guy again anyway, so it hardly matters what name I gave him. He'd be gone in 10 minutes if I could help it. I took another long sip of my drink, trying my best to ignore him, but he just wasn't getting the hint. I suppose this called for more desperate measures. "What is a pretty girl like you sitting all alone at the bar for?" he asked. I rolled my eyes at him, and was about to say something a bit rude until I noticed Jennifer had already ditched me. She was no longer at the bar next to me, but instead, across the room in some random guy's lap. Wow, ditched already. I think that's a new record. We'd only been here 20 minutes. After realizing he was still waiting in my response, I quickly tried to think of something to say to scare him off. "Oh, you know. Just a single mom having a night out, while the kids are away," I smiled. "So you have kids?" he questioned, still not sounding as put off as I'd hoped. "Yes. 6 to be exact. If that didn't work, I don't know what would." Perhaps I should have gone with waiting on my lesbian lover to return from the bathroom thing. It wouldn't bring up any questions, and I would have been left alone by now, I think. "Oh really, and how did you pull that off?" "You couldn't be more than 22, he chuckled, clearly disbelieving. "Crap. I really should have come up with something better." I sighed and turned to him. "What will it take for you to go away?" I really hated being rude, but sometimes that's the only way to convey the message you weren't interested. "Letting me buy you a drink and your number," he grinned. "I already have a drink." He pulled a pin out from his pocket and handed it to me along with a napkin. "Your number then." Wow, this guy is persistent. "Get rid of him," my wolf growled. "He's not our mate." "I'm trying," I replied. "Okay," I nodded, taking the napkin and jotting down a number he'd be pleased with. "I'm sure Jennifer wouldn't mind." He picked it up and read it over with a smirk on his face, then tucked it away. "Thanks. I'll be in touch." I let out a long relieved sigh when he disappeared from the bar stool. "We should go find Daniel," my wolf said with a slight whimper. It bothered me that she still didn't understand that he belonged to someone else. He made his choice and he is happy with it. Is it really right that we destroy his happiness? Yes. He is ours. He will want us when he sees us, she explained. This same fight day after day was exhausting. It was like a never-ending battle between us. I just wanted it to stop. "You don't know that, and neither do I. Just let it go for now and I'll think about it," I bargained with her. I could feel the immense happiness coming off of her at my words. She wanted this. She had wanted this for days, and I didn't see any way around it without giving her exactly what she wanted. Daniel. So that's exactly what I was going to do. Or try to, at least. She was right. We needed to know if he wanted us, no matter how painful it might be. Chapter 3. Mom took the empty plate that sat in front of me and carried it to the sink. She had been cleaning all morning, and she was not about to stop now. I had a feeling she would have taken my plate whether I was done or not. You'd think she was expecting the president over for dinner with the way she was acting. There was not a part of this house that had been untouched by her. Well, apart from my room, of course. That was my responsibility. She was just washing up the rest of the dishes when Dad finally made his appearance. He had been going non-stop all day running errands for the Alpha and his father. I was starting to get worried about him. He looked so worn. He had to have aged 5 years since I last saw him. He needed to rest. "There you are." Mom smiled, walking over to greet him. "Claire and I were just about to send out a search party for you." She placed a small kiss on his cheek, so I looked away to give them some privacy. Well, that, and to shield my eyes. They were my parents after all. I didn't want to see them become all lovey-dovey in front of my eyes. I would have been home sooner if I could, but Alpha Daniel was relentless. He's still going crazy over that trespasser we had the other day. I nearly spit my drink all over the place at his statement. Could he mean who I think he meant? For my sake, I hope not. I should have reported him. We had a trespasser? I asked, looking at my father. He simply nodded. Yes, and Alpha Daniel won't rest until he is found. I nearly gasped but held it back. I didn't want to give anything away. You mean he's still here? What have I done? I'm afraid so, sweetheart. You'll have to stay inside until we get this resolved. It's Alpha's orders, he replied before taking the seat in front of me. No. 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 This is so bad. I'm sure to be punished for this. If anyone finds out. Oh goodness, what they might do. But what about work? I asked. If I didn't show up, Charlie would have my head. Even though Rita is back from vacation, she can't handle the dinner rush alone. What am I going to do? Call in sick, I suppose. There is nothing you can do about it. He sighed. Is Alpha still coming over for dinner? Mom asked, going back to her dishes. If I hadn't been sitting down, I was sure to have fallen over at that. How long had this been planned? Why wasn't I told? I felt alarm and panic rising up in me while Mom and Dad continued to discuss the arrangements for this evening. I had no idea what I was going to do about his, but I needed to figure it out quick. I could not be here when he arrived. Mate. We get to see our mate. My wolf howled joyously from within. She was just about ready to jump out of my skin at the mere mention of him. She couldn't have been happier about this. I, however, felt very differently about it. Claire, you should go upstairs and get cleaned up. You need to be presentable for company. Mom's voice broke me of my thoughts. She was staring at me with concern in her eyes. Are you all right? She asked. If she only knew. Perfectly. I lied. I couldn't very well tell her what was going on, now could I? The less she knew the better. This was my doing and my doing alone. I won't drag her or my dad into this. If you say so. She replied, not quite convinced. You better move along so you are ready when they arrive. I nodded without saying another word, and followed the stairs up to my room. As soon as I was inside, I locked the door behind me before resting my back against it and sliding to the floor. I let out a loud groan and rested my head in the palms of my head while thinking over my possibilities of getting out of tonight. Even thought they didn't look good. I refused to give up. I stood in the mirror examining my well-dressed figure while going over the plan in my mind. I had spent the evening getting reading an effort throw Mom off that anything was wrong, but the last thing I planned to do was stay here during the dinner. I turned away from the mirror and rushed over to the widow at the sound of a vehicle approaching. It must have been him because to my knowledge we weren't expecting anyone else, just the Alpha, his father, and the Beta. Yet another reason for me to be on edge tonight. Who wouldn't be? I'm guilty and my mate is in love with someone else. Who would have foreseen these turn of events? Just as the vehicle entered the drive, my heart beat wildly in my chest. I was only mere seconds from seeing my mate again since when I found out about him. Only this time I was prepared. Claire, come down. They have arrived. Mom yelled from below. I stayed in place until the golden glow of Daniel's hair appeared before me as he stepped out of the black Escalade. He was dressed in a pair of khakis with a red dress shirt to top it off. His stance indicated professionalism and business, something I knew to expect. After all, this was pack business. After the remaining people stepped from the car, They fell in step behind him while he led them up to the door. Daniel's POV. Welcome, Alpha. It's an honor to have you here. Patricia, Richard's mate, greeted us, welcoming us inside. Thank you. I nodded, stepping in. The aroma of food hit me as soon as I entered. Although it smelled delightful, that was not the reason we were here. We had business to discuss, and a lot of it. The pack is at risk, and until we found the intruder on our territory, I would not rest. My father, James, and I gathered around the small living room across from Richard, waiting for his wife to take the seat next to him. It was always customary for the Alpha to stand while doing business because it showed leadership and boldness. Something every Alpha needed to have. I believe someone is missing, James stated, eyeing the Warrens. That's right. Didn't they have a daughter? I believe her name was Claire, if I'm not mistaken. I used to attend high school with her a few years ago. I hadn't seen her much since graduation, apart from the few mandatory pack meetings we had. She didn't attend them otherwise. She was one of the few werewolves that went to the local college in town. A few of the elders had displayed displeasure because of this, stating it was encouraging other wolves to seek a life outside the pack, but I didn't feel it was necessary to become concerned until more wolves started following her example. It was a treat to the elders for the she-wolves to have a mind of their own. They didn't like the idea of them becoming so independent. It made the male wolves look weak. I suppose in that sense I had to agree with them. It should be the males taking care of the she-wolves. They were supposed to be mates to the males and bear pups, but that was it. They had a role to play, and if not for them the pack would never expand. This was why it was important to keep them here. I hadn't noticed Patricia had gotten up from her seat until the sound of her coming down the stairs broke me from my thoughts. The worry etched across her face was enough for me to become concerned as well. Richard, she's gone. A growl ripped through my chest. How dare she disrespect her Alpha? When I am invited to someone's house for a meeting, I expect the entire family to be there. I would not have come, had it not been important. I was to question everyone about any suspicious activities of the trespasser. What's worse is that she has also disobeyed my orders about leaving her home. No one except for me and a few others were allowed to walk the territory until this matter was resolved. Find her, I ordered. When you have her, she is to answer to no one but me. Understand? With quick nod of their heads, they were racing out the door and into the dark of the night toward the woods. Alpha, you'll have to excuse our daughter. I don't know why she would have done this, Richard said. He looked worried for his daughter, as he should be. She defied me, and for that she will have to pay the price, I stated. Richard shared a fearful gaze with his wife before nodding in submission. Yes, Alpha. I won't have some rebellious she-wolf disobeying me or my orders. She will have to learn her lesson and learn from her actions. It was the only way to set an example for the pack. It could not go unpunished. Claire's POV. I was standing in the middle of the woods in my human form. So far no one had seen me, but that was not to say that they wouldn't ever. I decided on staying human for obvious reasons. Had I have changed into my wolf, Daniel would have mind-linked me and ordered me back. I would have to obey then. There would be no escaping. At this point I had nothing more to lose. I continued on my way through the dark forest, looking for any sign that the highway was nearby. If my calculations were correct, then I would be coming upon the human territory very soon, and there would be nothing they could do to me with witnesses around. It was my safe haven. If only I could make it there. Where is that stupid road? I know I had to be close to it. I rarely entered this part of the woods, so it was hard finding my way around in it. I walked on a little further until I came to a large oak tree in middle of the woods and paused. I was lost. I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere a while back. But where? It was becoming very obvious to me by this point that it had been far too long since I had navigated the woods. I know it was my fault for not letting my wolf out to run when I should have, but I didn't have time to think about that now. I needed to figure out where I was and quickly. The snap of a branch got my attention and I spun around in alarm. What if it was the intruder? The one from yesterday? Would he hurt me? I don't know why I even thought about that question, since it was obvious that if he wanted to hurt me, he would have done it when he had the chance. However, this only raised more questions that I had been thinking about. Why was he really here and why had he stuck around? I now realized how stupid I was for believing his visiting a friend's story he had told me yesterday. There was no friend, and even if there was, he wouldn't have had to sneak on the property to see them. How naive could I get? Another snap of a branch not far from me caused me to jerk again. They were getting closer to me and I was panicking. If someone wanted to hurt me, then they would have no problem doing so. I wasn't that strong of a wolf anymore. I had been out of touch with that side of me for quite some time now. I never participated in things with the pack anymore. I was more of a lone wolf now. The fact that I still belonged to a pack was the only distinction from me being a rogue. Claire. The sound of our beater's voice came from behind. This was it. I was caught. No more running for me. He is sure to drag me back to Alpha kicking and screaming. And he should. We should have never have ran. He's our mate. Want mate? You don't even know if he wants us. He's with Jasmine, remember? I reminded her. She is not his mate. She snapped in return. I was a bit shocked at her behavior. She had never acted this way before. I suppose it was Daniel's appearance that brought it out in her. If only she understood I was doing this to protect us. I didn't want us to be hurt from the rejection we may receive. The Alpha is looking for you. James spoke behind me. We are here to take you back with us. I should have known to expect this, but I still felt alarm at his words. I didn't want to go back. Please don't. I begged as I faced him. I can't go back there. James was not the only one there. I quickly caught sight of Daniel's father, who was also there standing a little ways behind James to the right, looking at me with disappointment. He didn't need to say anything for me to know what he was thinking. It was pretty clear from the look on his face. Why? James asked, curiosity in his voice. I sighed. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell anyone. I just can't. I replied. He shook his head at me. I'm sorry, Claire, but that's not a valid reason. You have to come with us now. If you don't, he'll just come searching himself. You're in quite a bit of trouble for running off like you did. I nodded my head, knowing I was no match for the beta and the previous alpha. They were much stronger and faster than I. If I were to run now, it would only be a matter of seconds before they caught up to me again. As much as I hated to, I forced myself to walk to them. My wolf, however, was very pleased. This was what she was hoping for all along. We are only about 2 miles from your house. We can walk the rest of the way, he said, motioning for me to proceed. You've got a lot of explaining to do when we get back. Robert, the previous alpha, added. Based on that will be your punishment. The walk back to my house was long and agonizing. I had been dreading facing Daniel the entire way. I just knew that as soon as I faced him, it was all over. Everything would change. If he did accept me, no doubt he would be mad at me for running off. I suppose I only had myself to blame though. I should have just told him, and let the chips fall where they may. At least then I would know where I stood with him. It was better than not knowing, I suppose. Can I have a minute to collect my thoughts before going in? I asked, hoping they would at least give me that. No, James answered. He made it very clear he wanted to see you just as soon as you returned. I won't wander off. I promise. He merely shook his head. Your actions seem suspicious and you must be questioned about it. With what has happened in the past 24 hours, it must be done as a precaution. What exactly was he implying? You think I had something to do with the trespasser? I asked. I don't know. You tell us, Robert snapped. I knew he didn't take my disrespect towards his son very well, but did he really dislike me that much for it? It wasn't like I disrespected him directly. If he was acting this way over my disappearance, then there would be no way he'd be able to handle what else I had done. Yes, I might have willingly given up information to a stranger about our pack's whereabouts, but if I wouldn't have told him, someone else would have. Probably an unsuspecting human, who thought they were just giving him directions. As soon as my house was in view, my heart started racing again. My palms were getting sweaty, and my breathing was rapid. I'm sure James and Robert was curious as to what was going on, as they looked at me curiously again. My mate was inside my house, and he was about to meet us for the first time as his mate. He'll know everything soon. It was scary. Scarier than I believed it would be. And with every passing second my fear was getting worse. James seemed to be conveying some kind of message to the Alpha as we approached my house. His face was very serious. No more than 5 seconds later, Alpha Daniel was already coming out the door with my parents following close behind him. None of them looked happy. I could see my parents' disappointment just as obviously as I could see Robert's a little while ago in the woods. It made me feel bad that I had made them feel this way. In my attempt to run from my mate, I had hurt everyone, including my wolf. Taking my eyes off of them, I dropped them to the ground. I couldn't bear to look at them any longer. It was too hurtful. In only a matter of moments, Daniel was standing in front of me in his alpha stance. He had yet to speak. I could sense his anger. A loud growl erupted from within him at my lack of respect, causing me to flinch. He may have been my mate, but he could still be a bit frightening. He was the alpha after all. Look at me. He ordered me in his alpha tone, daring me to disobey. His command was too strong for me to ignore, and I had to do as he asked, whether I wanted to or not. I sucked in a deep breath, as I prepared myself for what was to come. This was it. Everything came down to this moment. The wait was over. It was meant to be. I lifted my face slowly to meet his and our eyes locked. In that moment something snapped, and it was as if everything fell into place. I could feel it, everything it felt to have mate, and so did he. He smiled at me. A happy, genuine smile that took my breath away. This handsome, godly-looking man was mine. All mine. For once, I wasn't worried what he would think of me when he found out, because from the way it looked now, he couldn't have been more pleased. Mate, he whispered, don't get left behind in the chase for independence. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for alerts on the next adventure.